So welcome to the Green Maker Initiative webinar, Can Potters Save the Earth? 5 Science-Based Steps to Eco-Friendly Ceramics. I'm Hannah, I work at Make Southwest and I'm the project lead for our Green Maker Initiative. For those of you that don't know the organisation, Make Southwest is a gallery space in Bovey Tracy, Devon, exhibiting and selling a wide range of craft. We're also a leading charity for craft education and an Arts Council NPO. And as our name suggests, we represent the entirety of the southwest of England. Our Green Maker initiative came about a couple of years ago as a way to support creatives on their journey to becoming more sustainable. And this is why we're here today. We've got a great presentation coming up by Yuliya Makliuk, joining us online from Irpin, Ukraine. Yuliya is a ceramic artist, activist, and author driven by a passion for addressing the pressing challenges of our time, environmental crisis, social injustice, and war throughout her practice. In her studio, Here Now Pottery, she explores sustainable approaches and innovative techniques. And Yuliya's most recent book, Potters Save the Earth, has just been published. This webinar structure will be generally about 45 minutes presentation by Yuliya and leaving 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. Your microphones are all muted, but please pop your questions in the chat or the Q&A and I'll read them out at the end. So now I'm very pleased to hand over to Yuliya. Yeah, go for it.
Thank you, Hannah. Good morning, everyone. So glad to see you and to have you. Can you hear me well? Yeah, great. So thanks, Hannah, for your lovely introduction. It seems I don't have to talk a lot about myself anymore. So yeah, I'm Yuliya. I'm a potter and environmentalist from Ukraine. As you probably can hear, English is not my native tongue, so expect some accent, but I hope it will be fine in general. And without further ado, let me start presenting and sharing my screen so that we can follow the presentation. Okay, you should be able to see my full screen with the starting slide. Great. Yeah. So yeah, it's called Can Potters Save the Earth? 5 Science-Based Steps to Eco-Friendly Ceramics. And to keep you even more focused and interested, I promise you that these steps are not only science-based, but they are also free or very low cost to start practicing. So again, my name is Yuliya. I'm an owner of Here Now Pottery. It's a studio, a pottery brand here in Ukraine. I got an MSc in Ecology and Environmental Protection. I'm an author of this recent book, Potters Save the World, about sustainable ceramic practices, and I live in Irpin, Ukraine. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook and other platforms as Here Now Pottery, where I share my pots and sustainable ceramic tips, my cats, and other things that happen to me, but mostly ceramics. So in today's presentation, we're going to talk about the carbon footprint of studio ceramics and then the 5 areas in which we can make an improvement, namely the firing, materials, waste, packaging, impact beyond studio. Then hopefully we'll have some time for Q&A, and at the very end I'll share an exclusive promo code for my book for all the audience of this presentation. So firstly, I wanted to start with a statement that I firmly believe that as creatives, we have this superpower to change the world for the better, because I think that as artists, craftists, entrepreneurs, teachers, we can manifest the better world. We can bring the change that we need with both our imagination and our hands, because we physically create objects in the world, or organize creating these physical things in the world. And as potters or ceramic artists in particular, there are 2 ways in which we can be effective in stopping climate change and injustice. And first is making our ceramic making process more sustainable, more low carbon. And second is raising awareness with our art and making our art a voice for nature and for justice. And throughout the presentation, we're going to talk about these two main ways. But when speaking and starting to thinking about sustainable ceramics, we have to first define what exactly it is, because probably many of you already know that making pottery comes at an environmental cost. It's not, oh, sorry, my lamp just went off. I'll probably continue without it though. So yeah, we are extracting or we are using non-renewable materials coming from the earth, like clay and different minerals and oxides and so on to make our pottery. We also use electricity or fuel that contributes to CO2 emissions in the atmosphere and deepens the environmental crisis. But is it really so bad for the environment? Like, how do we judge? How do we compare? Where is the benchmark? And what can we do about that as artists, studio potters, ceramic teachers, maybe business owners, and so on? And these were the questions that I personally have been grappling with since the very first lesson in ceramics that I've taken. And I've been experimenting in my own practice, trying different techniques and methods, to make my ceramics more eco-friendly. But it was last year in particular when I started to work on this question more precisely, when I dived deep in the research of carbon footprint of ceramics. So the carbon footprint in a nutshell is the amount of CO2 that is being emitted into the atmosphere during the entire life cycle of an item or a process or a lifestyle, right? For example, for ceramics, you can see here like this little scheme on the slide. It's a life cycle of a ceramic production, and it starts with raw material extraction, where the clay and materials are being dug out of the earth. Then it's being transported to, say, a studio, where the ceramic is being produced by shaping it or on a wheel or slip casting or hand building, glazed, fired, and so on, decorated. Then it's been packaged and either sold at a craft show or at a retail store, was shipped to the end user. And then it's being used, presumably it's a tableware, so it's, people drink or eat out of it. They wash it for some amount of time until the piece eventually breaks and being disposed of, either to the landfill or to the recycling facilities. So this is, in a nutshell, a life cycle of a ceramic mug, and this is a scheme where we can assume the carbon footprint or the CO2 emissions being produced. So for my research, I started by measuring and taking notes of all of the processes in my studio and also in my colleagues' studios. And I took notes of how much clay I was using and other materials, where they came from, what were the stages, how much electricity I used, what packaging materials, and so on. So all of the stages, I took notes and had like list of processes. And then I used a specialized software to calculate the CO2 emissions at each stage. It's a long process, but in a nutshell, this is what I came up with. These are the results that I obtained. So I started with creating a model of the so-called average handmade mug. So picture a mug of 350 milliliters made from a local stoneware on a wheel, fired to Con 6, glazed with commercial glaze, fired again, then packaged with a plastic bubble wrap, shipped to a customer. For this model, I shipped from Europe to the United States because this is where the most of my ceramic is being sold to through Etsy. Then I assumed it was used for 3 years before eventually breaking up and being thrown away to the landfill. So this is just, a normal handmade mug. I think you would agree that you probably saw a lot of mugs like that on the market, or maybe you are making things like this as well. So this is like a model product. And let's see what are the CO2 emissions associated with this particular mug model. So when I calculated the emissions before the mug was shipped, so everything that happened in the studio, the results were 2 kilograms CO2 per mug. And here most emissions came from firing. It was 1.4 kilograms just from firing itself. And for this model, it was the electrical firing, so electrical kiln. Also, major contributors to these emissions were the plastic packaging, the glaze-free production, and the local transportation. So like kind of what happens before the mug is sold, what is within the potter's direct control, lead to 2 kilograms of CO2 per mug. But if we calculate the whole life cycle, so like the shipping to the customers, the use, and the end of life, it actually summed up to more than 7 kilograms CO2 per mug, so 7.5, in which the most damaging stages were the cargo flight from Europe to the United States, and then heating water for dishwashing. So, this mug would be hand washed by a user, say for 3 years, and they would need to heat water for this. And this resulted in more than 2 kilograms of CO2. Then production of dishwashing detergent was also quite harmful. And then the decay of the packaging at the landfill was also a significant factor. So all in all, 7.5 kilograms per whole life cycle, or just 2 kilograms of what happens in the studio within the potter's immediate control. Now, what do we do with these numbers? Is it a lot? Like, what does it mean? 2 kilograms CO2 per mug. How do we compare it, and what do we do with it? I used another software called the Carbon Translator, and it says that 2 kilograms of CO2 per mug production is the same pollution, the same CO2 emissions as for, say, 5 avocados or less than half of a steak. So it sounds like pretty little, not that much. Like, what is half a steak? It's not a huge emissions, probably. It's not like, burning a barrel of oil or anything. But probably as spotters, we do not produce just one mug, right? We likely are producing hundreds of or thousands of items per year. And there I calculated, like, if we take the whole life cycle of a mug, 7.5 kilograms per mug, and multiply it by 1,000 mugs per year, it would equal to 4.5 round flights from New York to Amsterdam. So that's quite a lot. It's a significant emission and a significant contribution to climate change. So like running a pottery business, of course, it's just a model and it's a very average mug. Maybe some of you are not making mugs, maybe you are making vases or sculptures, or you are teaching ceramics, but nevertheless, it kind of gives us a scope of how much a pottery studio can contribute to climate change. So like the resume here is that studio potters can have quite a significant impact and contribution to climate change. And nowadays, more and more ceramic artists and potters are trying to think how to cut their environmental impacts and how to become more eco-friendly, more sustainable, and to maybe even help to solve environmental problems. And of course, my idea, my driving force was not just to come up with the numbers, but to actually see what are the ways to reduce those numbers and to become more eco-friendly as a potter. And thus, I came up with the next model, which I called the Eco Handmade Mug, and it was based on my own experimentations in the studio and on interviews with other expert potters and webinars that I ran throughout the year. So it was like a combined effort. And here is what I changed in the Eco Mug. So first of all, it was not fired for bisque. It was raw glazed. And then fired just once. Instead of the commercial glaze, I used wild clay slip. The temperature was the same. It was packaged not with plastic, but with reused paper and reused cardboards. Then in the owner's behavior, also some changes were assumed. So it was washed with baking soda instead of dishwashing detergent. The water for washing was powered with solar energy, and then the packaging was composted, which was easy because it was not plastic anymore, it was just paper. So with all these changes, there were significant changes to the carbon footprint as well. And I don't know about you, but for me, these changes kind of seem very realistic. It's not something radical, it's just raw glazing, using local clay slip, packaging with paper, and also suggesting some changes in the user behavior. So it's something doable, I would say. And let's see how it influenced the calculation. So the overall life cycle, which was 7.5 kilograms in the previous scenario, now it only was 4 kilograms of CO2 per mug. So almost 2 times less carbon was emitted during the life cycle of this mug. And if we are talking about the studio processes, so what is within the potter's control, the result was 0.7 kilograms, so less than 1 kilogram CO2 per mug. And it is a huge reduction compared with 2 kilograms in the first scenario. So with just skipping bisque firing, substituting packaging, and suggesting some changes to the user's behavior, we drastically reduced the carbon footprint already almost in 2 times. And I hope you would agree it is quite a good result. And rather achievable for many potters. But then I wanted to go even further, and this is the last model I'm going to show you before moving to the steps, to the 5 science-based steps. So this scenario is rather hypothetical. I didn't actually create a mug like this. It's a model again, and I called it the net zero. And I wanted to figure out which ways would help to decrease the carbon footprint drastically, almost to the zero. And here the changes were made were the following. So the electricity that used for firing was produced by solar power, solar roof panels on the top of the studio, and some potters do have panels like this, lucky them. Then it was shipped locally, so it was not sold to the United States. It was shipped within Europe and by train, by land transportation, which is much more eco-friendly. Again, it was packaged with reused paper, washed with baking soda. But here, the user didn't heat the water, so the water was cold. Packaging was composted, and at the very end, any emissions that were produced during this life cycle were offsetted. So I don't know how familiar you are with the concept of the offsets, but it's actually an effort to compensate or to balance the CO2 emissions that were made. And one can do it either by themselves, so by planting trees or investing in renewable energy, restoring natural ecosystems and things like that. Or you could pay someone else, a third party, to do these actions and to sell you this emission reductions, and this is called the offsets. So in this model, in this hypothetical radical zero emissions model, we can see that before shipping, the mug produced only 100 grams of CO2 per mug, which is super small. And these emissions mainly came from firing. Even though the electricity was produced by solar panels, still the solar panels and the batteries and their production and use and disposal, they do have their carbon footprint as well. So it's not zero, but it's still very little emissions. And the rest emissions were produced during the washing and transportation, local transportation, and things like that. And the whole life cycle was just half a kilo of CO2. So remember our first model, the whole life cycle was 7.5 kilograms, and this is just half a kilo. So a radical reduction, and it can be further compensated by the offsetting. For me, this model is something that I cannot do at the moment. I don't have solar power plants, and in Ukraine we cannot buy renewable energy from the grid because it's all mixed. You don't get to choose. But I know that in the United Kingdom, in some areas you can buy the green tariff, and your energy would be coming from the renewable sources. Again, local transportation is doable. It just means some changes to the business model. Yeah, yeah, and the changes to the users' behavior. This is not within our control, but again, we can encourage our users to use our ceramics in a sustainable manner. Again, if you're making decorative pieces which do not require washing, then you don't have to factor in those washing associated emissions, and your whole life cycle would be smaller than from the tableware. So anyways, these were the numbers, and I know it can be a little bit difficult to follow them, but they give us the basis, the benchmark, apologies, the benchmark, on which we can then base our further changes in the studio if we want to become more sustainable ceramicists. So this research, what it did to me, it helped me to identify the so-called hotspots. And the hotspots are the stages that pollute the most, that are the most damaging, where even a small change in our practice can bring a big positive result. And these hotspots are using energy or fuel for firing, choosing sustainable ceramic materials, avoiding plastic packaging, cutting international shipping, and educating our clients about the sustainable use of disposal of pottery. Next, I'm going to go through the steps that address these hotspots. These are some very practical tips that either I'm using myself or my colleagues who I interviewed for my book. I will go through from the kind of most simple, the easiest steps, to the more profound and more complicated. And I'll show you the examples from my practice, how I incorporate those advice and what the results look like. And we will start with the firing, because as the research shown, and it's not just my research, it's also other assessment by scientists in the peer-reviewed journals, that the firing of pottery is responsible for around 80% of carbon emissions during the carbon production. Right. So whatever small changes we can make in the firing brings us the biggest results in the carbon footprint and in our contribution to climate change. So what are the rules of low carbon firing? And again, I want to make this, I want to say that, of course, firing influences not only the carbon footprint, it also influences the aesthetics of our works, its usability, maybe it's rooted in the tradition that we are part of, and so on. And sometimes we are not in a position or in a situation to drastically change our firing practice or firing routines, but there are definitely things that we can control and can change. And the very low cost, no cost at all steps that are still efficient are the quality control, meaning really making the decision for what comes into the kiln and what becomes permanent into the world, and avoiding to fire things that are not up to our standard, right? That maybe have some defects, some cracks, maybe they have too thick bottoms, or we just don't like them. And the rule number one is just don't fire them, do not produce more trash, and do not use more electricity for them. Just, recycle them. That's rule number one. Second, also very simple one, is no idle firing. It is about making sure that we pack our kilns tightly, that there are no empty space in the kiln. And why it is important? Because kiln would use approximately the same amount of energy or fuel, regardless of how tight it is packed. And if we only put a few items into the whole kiln, it would still use the amount of energy needed for much more items, right? So the more items we can pack in, the better. Next step, again, no cost at all. It's speeding up our schedules, eliminating where possible those preheats, slow ramp rise, unnecessary holds, and so on. I know from experience that you could safely reduce the firing time at least in 1.5 times without any significant changes to the aesthetics or the look of the items. Next, we have a little bit more difficult steps, and they are lowering the temperature of the firing. We could do it by either choosing more low firing materials uh, or to add in more flux and um, other materials to the materials we are using to lower their vitrification temperature, or just changing altogether. So for example, one change that John Breed is suggesting is switching from Con10 to Con6 materials, where you still can have good stoneware results, nice aesthetics, but use much less energy. And nowadays there even is a low firing porcelain that you can use as well. Next step, very important, is raw glazing. When you skip the bisque and you glaze your ceramics on the greenware stage, and then fire it as usual, or maybe a little bit slower. And by this, you can not only save energy or fuel, but also save your time drastically, and also achieve a better bonding between the clay body and the glaze. They just fuse into each other much better. And the last step would be, if possible, choosing cleaner fuel. Again, not everyone can choose their fuel, but the more cleaner fuels are wood waste, like different offcuts, fallen branches, and so on, switching to renewable energy like solar or wind energy. And then propane, liquid propane gas, is also considered kind of a more eco-friendly fuel. So if you could use one of those options, that would be good for your overall carbon footprint. And now one of the ultimate 5 science-based steps that I promised I would share is adapting. Again, it's a repetition, but I wanted to highlight it because it's so important, is skipping bisque and adopting raw glazing and single firing routines to save up to 50% of energy and carbon or fuel, and your time as well. I know that majority of us as spotters have been probably taught from the very beginning that like the normal way is that you make your item, you bisque it, you glaze, and you fire it again. But with a little bit of learning and practice, sticking to single firing is just fine, and I actually enjoy it even more. I'm still learning it. I do not single fire everything, but like gradually more and more, and I actually enjoy it very much. Here are some of the examples of my recent single fire items. So the blue cups, the blue mugs, are made from grogged stoneware with very fine grog and covered with Amako Pottery Choice glazes in the bone dry stage and fired to Con6. All my ceramics is Con6. And you can see they are perfectly normal, shiny, bright, good stuff. The yellow cups with the silicone lids, they are called the travel mugs. I slip cast them from white stoneware, and then I glaze them in the bone dry stage with this yellow glaze that you can see is not a glaze. It is a slip from my local wild glaze, which melts at Con6. I do not add anything. It just slip and it produces this perfect yellow ochre surface. And then I add just a little bit of decorative blue glaze on top to create some interest. And the green balls at the right side are made from, again, Ukrainian stoneware with its rather large pieces of grog in it. So it's like rustic and a little bit raw, and then covered with a commercial celadon glaze. And the problem here was that the glaze won't really stick to the bone dry clay very well. It would just flake off, which caused problems during firing. And the solution was to add about 5% of glue to the glaze. I'm using the PVA glue. It's like the glue that you use for paper or wood, and it works just perfect, solved the problem. So again, single firing good for the planet, good for your time, and can produce some nice results. The next area I wanted to talk about are the materials sourcing. Why it is important? Because obviously we make physical objects and we make them from the materials that come from the earth, from our immediate environment. Unlike, you know, other arts like poetry or maybe painting, we actually work with the minerals, and those minerals, even though earth clay is actually an abundant mineral, it's one of the most widespread minerals in the earth's crust, still some of the grades of it can become extinct. Can, you know, we can just mine them off and they're gone. Like, for example, the Albany slip in the United States or the Yixing clay in China, or other grades. So that's one thing. Another thing is that mining is associated with landscape degradation. You know, if you've been anywhere around mines or quarries, you know what I'm talking about. It's actually just huge holes in the earth where nothing can live, no plants or animals. And also mining is sometimes associated with human rights violation, where people are displaced from the area or they are being exploited in the mining processes. So the rules here, and again, I start from very simple tips. Tip number one is to buy your materials locally, as close to you as possible, and thus you avoid long distance shipping and avoid this fuel being burned during the transportation. Number two is choosing a responsible supplier that abides to legal regulations and that does not buy their minerals from illegal miners or compromised regions. The next is avoiding some of the materials that are associated with human rights violations or that have a huge environmental footprint. And some of the examples of these materials are gold, cobalt oxide, and talc. These are better be avoided. Or if you cannot avoid them, you have to be very careful and to work with the best suppliers to ensure that your materials do not come from these illegal or compromised areas. Next steps with ethical materials would be sourcing your own wild minerals, like picking up clay, maybe some feldspar, marble, and so on. But again, it needs to be done with care as not to destruct the landscape and also not to break the landowners or land carriers' rights. So better, if you're not sure, better ask for permission from the authorities or the landowner. And the last step is to use waste materials instead of new ones. So imagine that instead of actually paying for someone to go and dig or mine the materials from the earth, you could use something that is already here, something that's been waste and thrown away. And here you can have glass, rocks, offcuts or rocks powder, eggshells, seashells, and other types of wastes. And there are many potters who are incorporating these materials already into their practice. And my ultimate step for materials would be this: research and use your local materials instead of importing them. So the closer to you, the better. And it's not only about the transportation, even though it's very important. It's also about knowing your local regulations. So you probably can figure out like what is this particular company doing, what are the laws in your country, and whether they are not breaking any of them. And number three reason for using your local materials is that this way you can make your ceramics really stand out from the crowd, right? Because these days when you go onto Instagram or Etsy and you search for handmade ceramics, many of them are pretty similar, pretty universal, because people are using all the same materials that they buy from the universal international suppliers. But if you are using your local, either wild or mined materials, it's pretty likely that your ceramics will look different and will make you unique on the market. Here are some of the examples of what I make with local materials. So on the left, you see this marbled neovyagi stuff made from Ukrainian stoneware and my own wild clay slip. I just mixed them and they worked quite well, I think. On the right side is a series that I'm particularly proud of because it is made of these bowls and the cup are made of materials that I collected within this 30-kilometer distance from my studio. So I'm using this red clay from an old brick quarry, some stilt that I found in the wild, and again this yellow clay slip that I'm using for glazing. And it makes me so happy because it kind of shows what the the ultimate European ceramic looks like. This is and this clay is a pain to work with. It's not as easy and workable as a commercial one, but and it kind of dictates the shape, right? So you can only make this shape out of it. And for me, it really adds to its uniqueness and its localiness. I really like it. And in the middle, this mug, I'm also quite like it. It's made of old Ukrainian, all wild materials, but not only European. These are clays and muds and sands that come from all over the country, including the areas that are currently occupied by Russia. So there is no access to it, and people from there can't get out. And I got these materials from before the full-scale war, and now I incorporated them and created this item, which kind of represents different soils of Ukraine and the hopes that soon they will be deoccupied and we will be able to travel there and meet our people who stay there. So the next area would be the studio waste. And you probably know as potters that our craft can produce lots of different nasty wastes and byproducts. So the main rule here would be the 5R rule, which is refuse, reduce, reuse, repurpose, and recycle. And it kind of tells us that before throwing anything away, we should think in advance when we buy the materials and when we use them in a way that we can avoid actually producing waste, or whatever we cannot avoid, we can use less, or we can reuse, we can repurpose, like these buckets from glaze, for example, we can clean them and use over and over again. Or whatever we cannot reuse and repurpose, we can recycle, or at least try to. So here, some very widespread practice is reclaiming all your clay. It's just common sense, and many potters are doing it, especially in small studios. However, I was shocked to learn that in some bigger studios, that's not the case, and that's why I'm advocating very fiercely for reclaiming all the clays that we have. Next one is similar, collecting and recycling all our glaze waste. Again, it's pretty simple. You just collect them in buckets, you stir them, you screen them with a sieve, you test them. Usually the color would be something like grayish, brownish. You can add some pigments to it and use as a normal glaze, which saves you money again. Next rules or advices are a little bit more difficult. It is how do we deal with fired ceramics, whether it's a defect item, piece we do not like, or something that has been broken. So actually you can crush and grind them and to produce your own grog. And this grog can be made so fine, so small that you can add it to the casting slips. This is something I experimented with, and although I have to do more attempts in it, it's pretty doable as well. And another advice would be trying to use all your household waste in ceramic production as well. So like you can use paper in paper clay, you can crush glass to add to your glazes, you can repurpose packaging, and so on. So these are basic studio waste tips. And my ultimate advice here, science-based and free to use, is to reuse and recycle any waste materials to substitute primary raw resources. So try to look around into your studio and see what you can use instead of buying new materials from a supplier. Again, it can save you some money and save precious nature materials. Here are some of the examples of my works with waste. So in the middle, you can see a series that I called the life cycle vases, and it was a series of round vases and this chavan, I think, made of 100% studio waste. So it's clay trap sludge, glaze sludge, broken shards, broken glass, and I think I also have smalt. It's like a version of stained glass as well. So I mixed it all up, ran tests, and came up with the series. On the left, you can see examples of some of the waste materials that I'm using. So paper goes to paper clay. Here are different shards of glass, smalt, crushed ceramics, glazed granulate. So glazed granulate is when you have your glaze waste and you sinter it a little bit and you crush it to produce small granules, like small grains of glaze that you can incorporate into clay body or your glaze. And at this white vase on the right, you can see me using this brown granulate to add little speckles. And this triangle test plate on the right is a triaxial test I'm running right now. It's pretty fresh. I'm trying to formulate a glaze made entirely of studio waste. So it has a clay trap sludge, glaze sludge, and wood ash from the stove. And it's not done yet, but I'm getting somewhere. We have still 2 more areas to cover, and packaging is the next one. So here the rules are pretty simple. Number 1 is reusing whatever packaging materials you can get, either from delivery to your studio or from your local businesses that are, happy to get rid of their packaging. I personally often go to the post office and take their post client packaging and reuse them. It is a general environmental rule to avoid any plastics and styrofoam because they have a great environmental costs. Of course, if you have old plastic and you can reuse it, that's fine. But in general, paper and cardboard are the most environmentally friendly options, especially if they are recycled or reused. You may have heard of or tried the starch-based plastics and peanuts made of cornstarch. Starch. They are fine from environmental perspective. They are a little more expensive and they're not available in every area, but if you can get your hands onto it, use them. Ask your customers to compost or recycle your packaging, and of course, if it's biodegradable, yeah, like paper or starch, it's doable, easy. And if you can, choose eco-friendly post services in your area, someone who are using e-vehicles, land transportation, and so on. So the ultimate rule here, again, is reusing packaging. My calculations have shown that reusing cardboard and paper wrappings have a very big positive impact on the carbon footprint. So I try to reuse whatever I have and for many times. Also, my studio is full of old boxes because of this. Here are some of the examples of how I package. So you can see there's plenty of different paper-based materials. I don't use plastic sticky tape, and instead I either use these threads or a paper water-activated tape. And I also use cloth or cloth bags to package some of my items. And for this, I use mostly reclaimed fabric. And the last but not the least area here would be not only cutting our environmental footprint, but also increasing our social footprint. As artists, we have this huge power to influence the society and influence people's mind. And I want to encourage us all to use this power as much as we can, because this is where we can have the greatest impact, in my opinion. And what we can do as potters, first is making items for sustainable living. Like for example, the ceramic travel cups that I shown you earlier, or the ceramic water filters to purify water, or ceramic rocket stoves that are used in the developing countries to help people eliminate smoke that is dangerous for their lungs, and so on. Other thing would be creating items that raise awareness, as for example, these mugs on the right with the Love Earth slogan on them. It's kind of propelling the message into the masses. Next would be creating items or series that raise funds for eco organizations and charities. Again, these mugs, Love Earth, were sold to raise money for a Ukrainian national park. They needed it to plant trees or something. Other options here would be to work with scientists, or at least to first study some information and create habitats for wildlife, for animals. And here examples could be, for example, artificial coral reefs, insect hotels, nests for some species of birds, like for example for swallows, bird feeders, and so on. So there is huge area of exploration in this. Other options would include performances, if you are more into this kind of art, to help people experience and reflect upon our relationships with nature. And land art, actually cooperating with nature itself as an artist to create meaning and message, and to help people realize our role in solving climate crisis. So ultimate step number 5 to become a more eco-friendly potter is to use your craft to create either symbolic or practical solutions to environmental problems. Here are just a few examples from my practice. So on the left, you can see again the ceramic travel cups that substitute single-used cups. Then these vases are a series that I called the melting point. And here I used waste materials like glass that I incorporated into the body to show how they melt. And it was a reflection of the melting glaciers because of the climate change. And the sculptures on the right are a series called I Will Sprout with Flowers. And these are the busts made from unfired clay, which I filled with soil and seeds. And I would put them outdoors where they would decay under the elements, and gradually the seeds would sprout and transform the whole thing into a flower bed. And I dedicated them to the memory of people who were killed in my town, Irpin, in Ukraine, during the Russian invasion. So it was like a memorial to them. I have a bonus step, which is about joining efforts with other sustainable potters and learning new ideas from each other and sharing what we find, sharing our advice and techniques. If you are using Instagram, here are these hashtags that I came up with: sustainable ceramics practice and Potters Save the World. You can put them in the search bar on Instagram. You can subscribe to them, and you will get notified when other potters write and post something about their sustainable practices, and you can use them yourself as well. So wrapping up this long talk, can potters save the world by themselves alone? Maybe not, but they definitely can help to save the world by making low carbon ceramics, which is single firing, local materials, waste recycling, and reusing packaging, and by engaging in environmental campaigns like designing for environmental lifestyle, raising awareness, raising funds, and also very important as an artist to enjoy your art and to have fun while creating, and to be connected with your inspiration and with nature. Here is a unique discount code for my book, Potter Saves the World, about all the sustainable techniques and tips and interviews with sustainable potters from all over the globe. It's available as an ebook and paperback on Etsy and Amazon. If you buy it on Etsy, you can use this code GreenMakers10 at Here Now Pottery Etsy.com, and you will get a discount. And if you want, if it's a paperback, and if you want, I can sign it for you and send it to you by post. Um, Thank you so much. You can find me on internet as Here and Now Pottery, Instagram, Facebook, Patreon, Amazon, Etsy. Thank you for your attention, and let's see if we have any questions, and I'll try to answer them.
Yeah, we've got 3 or 4 questions that have come up during the thingy. So I'll start asking them and we'll see how many we can get done. Lynn has asked, will single fire work on earthenware?
Good question. I don't see a reason why it wouldn't. You would probably, like, first when you start trying single fire, it's a series of experiments. The basic principles here is you want your glaze to stick very well to the body. And this can be achieved either by adding about 5-10% of the clay of the body to the glaze. So you mix the body into the glaze, or adding glue. So that would be the main first steps. Then you would need to adjust your schedule, your firing ramp a little bit. So basically, the item in the kiln, it has to go through all the bisque firing stages and then the glaze stages at the end. You can Google the single firing schedules on internet, they are available. Also, a good suggestion would be to use the clay body with grog or sand or something. You want the body to be a little bit more open so that the water evaporates more easily. And very important, the item, the glazed item, has to be completely dry before going into the kiln. So like you want to be 100%, 200% sure that it dried completely.
Wow, that's great. And question from Deborah. There's a lot of talk in the studio pottery industry about food safety of the materials we use. Do you test for food safety and durability of the single fire pots and also the pots with wild clay and glazes?
I do not. Because in Ukraine we don't have we don't have such a service to give your ceramics and to test, but I've seen other people doing it with some good results, and I don't see why it shouldn't be food safe unless you add some toxic materials or it's not vitrified.
Fab, grand.
But yeah, but if you have a requirements from your regulatory body, you better test it, of course.
Yes. Yeah, that's the classic UK, I think, the nanny state, as we're called. So a question from Nikki. How do you crush your waste to use in the glazes, like your glass and ceramics? And also, they've added that this is a brilliant talk and very informative. So thanks for that.
Okay, so crushing waste has been a pain in the back. Let's put it this way. In the ideal world, I would have several ball mills of different size and would, just mill it. In reality, I use hammer and sieves, and also I have like this DIY extension that you can put on the angle grinder. It's also available on internet. You can either buy it. It's called rock crusher and it's used in the gold prospecting, or you can make it yourself if you're good with equipment. It's actually like a round box. You put it on the angle grinder, you put your waste inside and you mill it for some 10 minutes. It's a nasty process, produces lots of dust. Always wear a mask, goggles, and everything. But yeah, if you can have access to a ball mill, that would be the best solution. Some people actually make it with a pestle and mortar, but I don't have such patience.
That's grand, thank you. One from Alison. Digging and processing own clay is very time consuming, which has to be passed on to the consumer. Educating customer is the issue. Will enough people value that?
Well, there are two questions in one. So first, I want to probably address the wild clay. In my book, one of the chapters or sub-chapters is about the business model in general, like the business model. We are not all doing business, but that's a term. Like, it's all about how we actually earn money while being potters. And there are many ways. So one way would be being a production potter and making this thousands of items and selling them at not very high price, which is a fine way, but it's labor intensive and it has a bigger environmental footprint. Other way would be making less things but more high priced. And for me, working with wild materials or with sustainable techniques in general is about making less rather than more. So I'd rather make less items. I explain their value to the customers through the videos I shoot, through the webinars, through messaging, explain why it is valuable, and attract the customers that are really care about the earth and who want to support sustainable making, who are willing to pay a little higher price because of all the work and considerations that goes into this particular item. And yeah, this is kind of what I kind of works for me. Yeah, again, it's an answering to the second part of the question about whether customers would understand and stick to it. I think it is very important to build an audience. Like, if you are an eco-friendly potter, it is very important to build an audience of eco-friendly followers, people who share your values, who want to take part in the transformation, in the good change. And yeah, those people would definitely try to do something. And if you kind of course, it can be, it can be directive. You cannot say that you must wash your mugs with soda. But if you add, your business card or something to the packaging, and somewhere it says, oh, there are sustainable care tips, then some people would definitely use it.
Great, thank you. We've got one from Sarah May, who said that she'd love to know more about low firing porcelain, if you have any kind of thoughts or opinions on that.
Okay, I'm not very experienced in that. I don't work with porcelain. My only experience was using the porcelain body. It was called the Arctic, I think. It fires at 1280 degrees Celsius. It's not transparent. It's just white, but it's fine. But I read an article about from someone who works on even more low firing porcelain. Let me just super quickly try to find it here. There is an article on Studio Potters, and I will share it in the chat probably. Where is the chat? Here. Yeah, here. Yeah, read it. Maybe it will give you some ideas or place to start.
That's great. Thanks so much. I think we've actually covered all the questions. If we haven't, I'm sorry, but we are bang on time, which is amazing because you fit so much stuff into that. So thanks so much. That was really incredible.
I hope it wasn't too overwhelming.
No, it was amazing. Honestly, it was so informative. And that's exactly the sort of comments we're getting in the chat, that people have really enjoyed it and found it really inspiring. So yeah, thank you so much, Yuliya. Thank you everybody who's attended. And once I've kind of sorted out the recording, I'll be sharing it with everyone, and we can share it on Yuliya's social medias or website, whatever, and we'll share it on ours as well. But yeah, Yuliya, have a nice, well-earned break. Go and have a
Thank you so much,
down.
Hannah, for having me. It's been an honor, and thank you everyone for coming. It's a shame I didn't get to talk to each of you, but yeah, that's life. I will read the chat probably. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.